It seems like I said for an entire year that the Invoked variant of the Blue Eye strategy was the best version of the deck to run. However, it took me a very long time to profile this, and the reason is that the Invoked cards were way too expensive to just buy them only to put them in a Blue Eyes deck that I likely won't play at any tournaments coming up. However, the cards actually recently got reprinted, which is really cool, and I picked up an entire Invoked engine at the 200th YCS, so I thought finally now is the time to profile the deck. Now I will say, if you couldn't tell already, I am a little sick. That's why I posted a stream highlight yesterday, was because I was way too sick to actually record something. I don't know if there'll be a video tomorrow. Hopefully I'll try to figure out something. But anyway, let's jump right into this. And I should mention real quick, one of the main reasons this deck is good now is because of this guy. This is super important. I'll talk as we go along here why the Invoked version of this deck is really powerful, but Alistar the Invoker of Madness is really relevant, and it's actually what this deck was kind of missing. I played this deck a lot about 8 months ago or so, and one of the biggest issues was that there weren't really like good link monsters to put in it, so that Alistar card really makes it easier to play. Anyway, let's jump right in. We first off have 3 copies of Alistar the Invoker. I mean, nothing too fancy here, nothing too surprising. This card's really powerful though. Basically, in this deck, we're trying to link into the Alistar link monster before we actually activate Invocation. There's lots of ways to do that. I think one of the best sort of 2-card, well, I don't know, it's not technically a 2-card combo because you need a Blue Eyes in hand, but one of the best cards to combo with Alistar is Alternative. So basically, what you're trying to do here is summon Alistar, add Invocation, summon Alternative, and then you pop an opponent's card, and then you use both of these cards to make the Alistar link monster, and then you activate Invocation, banishing both of them to special summon Makaba and then search Book of Law. That's actually a really good play, and I think that this deck does have a lot of potential, and that specific play is very important. Is that enough of a reason to play this version over like the Mech Knight version? Maybe not, but this deck definitely does have a lot of stuff going for it. So that's like the main 2-card setup right there. We're also playing 3 copies of Blue Eyes, kind of obviously, and then 2 copies of Dragon Spirit of White. I mean, I like these cards. They're good. I've seen some builds of this deck only play 1 Dragon Spirit. I think now more than ever, it's important to play 2 copies of this. It's really good against back row decks, and turns out every deck in the metagame is pretty much a back row deck. I mean, Altergeist, Sky Strikers, Trickstars, this thing is really good for taking out all of their back rows. So I like the card a lot right now. Moving on, we have the other big combo enabler for this strategy. So in other Blue Eyes decks, you very often are normal summoning the Sage with Eyes of Blue. In this deck, you're usually just using its in-hand effect. Once again, kind of like the combo with the Alternative, if you have Sage and Alistar, you summon Alistar, add Invocation, and then use Sage's effect to send the Alistar to the grave to summon a Blue Eyes from your deck, and then you banish these 2 engraved, summon Makaba. That was like sort of the old school Invoked Blue Eyes combo. It still works right now. It's not as good as it used to be because it doesn't let you make the link monster, which is what you're really trying to do, but it is worth mentioning. That's like a pretty good interaction. And then the other level 1s we play, we have 3 copies of, what is this one called? The White Stone of Ancients, and the White Stone of Legend. I just call like all of them the stones or whatever. So this is another reason that this deck was played, especially like back in the day when these cards first came out. Discarding these off of Makaba is super powerful. You not only get to negate and banish an opponent's card, you also get to search a card. I think that's really good, and even today, like by today's standards, that's a pretty good value sort of oriented play, and I think that that's one of the major reasons that I like this deck so much, is because unlike the normal Blue Eyes deck where most of your cards aren't actually plussing in terms of card advantage, with this version you actually do have a lot of different +1 effects, so you can just bury your opponent, and sort of it's more like a control oriented strategy. So that's it for the monster cards. No hand traps. You certainly can put them in there. I found it difficult to actually find the room to play hand traps, and also the metagame right now is kind of all over the place, so I don't know what I'd play as far as hand traps go. For the spell cards, which we have a lot of 3 of here, so we have 3 Magical Meltdown and 3 Invocation. We are playing Pot of Desires, so we really don't want to banish like all of our copies of Invocation, and you really do want to open Alistar. It's the I would say even more so than when this deck first came out, before the Alistar link existed, well, before links existed, but especially more than when I played this deck the last time, like 8 months ago, when I was playing during link summoning without the Alistar link. You didn't really care about opening Alistar that much, but I feel like nowadays every single hand you really want the Alistar. So you want to play 3 Meltdown, you want to play 3 Invocation. You're really just trying to summon those invoked monsters. And then also, we have 3 Melody. This card's really powerful. You can use it to get rid of extra Alistars if you have them. Otherwise, you're just doing your normal Melody plays where you discard the stones and stuff. And then, like I mentioned, 3 Pot of Desires. It's not for everyone, but I think of all the decks I've ever played, Blue Eyes is like the deck I feel most comfortable playing 3 Pot of Desires in. This card is just so good in Blue Eyes. Like, there's so many 3-ofs, there's almost no cards you care about banishing. I'm trying to think, unless you banish like all 3 copies of Blue Eyes or all 3 copies of Invocation, you really just don't care. It doesn't matter at all. It's just super great. I like this card a lot in Blue Eyes. For alternative draw power, we have 3 copies to trade in. This is pretty much a staple in Blue Eyes. I think most of you probably already know that. In this deck, you can banish the things you discard with this card for the Invocation. That's pretty powerful, but obviously this is sort of just like a staple card in the Blue Eyes strategy. We have 3 copies of Return of the Dragon Lords. Another advantage to running this deck is that this card is insane to discard off of the Makaba. Obviously, it's cool to get the revival effect and then do some link summoning, but if you can't do that, this card is just really good to discard with Makaba, because once again, you're just getting more value. You're not only getting the negation of a spell card, which oftentimes, I feel at least, the normal Invoke strategies actually have difficulty discarding spell cards. If you play like Mech Knights and Hand Traps and Alistars as like your only real cards, a lot of times you're just only be able to negate a monster effect with Makaba. In this deck though, you have this card. Oftentimes I found in the past when I was playing this deck, I would just keep this in hand just to discard to negate a spell card. Really good, valuable play, so I like that card a lot. And then we have the newly semi-limited Called by the Grave. It's pretty important to not have your cards hit by Ash. Ogre doesn't really affect this deck too much. Reaper doesn't really matter. Droll kind of hurts as well, so you'll want to Call by Grave with the Droll. But really, it's just when your opponent ashes, like the trade-in or the Melody, you really aren't trying to take a -1, so just by activating Call by the Grave, you can push that play through. Oftentimes, if you don't have this card, you are like in a really weird spot. You'll regularly use the Pot of Desires just to bait out the Ash so that your trade-in resolves. You're not taking a -1. I mentioned that in like every deck profile for this deck, and people still don't quite get it. Basically, the problem is if your opponent ashes a trade-in or a Melody, you have now lost 2 cards and they've only lost 1 card, where if they Ash Blossom your Pot of Desires, you both players have only lost 1 card. But hopefully you just draw this card to prevent any of that from happening. Only 1 Monster Reborn, 1 Foolish Burial, which sounds like everything. 1 the Book of the Law. Like, I don't know how I feel this card. It's good. I think the main reason I play Book of the Law is like for a diversity card that you can actually search with the Alistar link. You don't always just need like 100 invocations in your hand, so this card's pretty cool. And you can kind of do some OTKs. I think it's also useful for when you summon, when you have to invocation and you don't have like a white monster and you just banish your opponent's Ash Blossom. So then you summon the Purgatrio and you want to end on Makaba. This card can just summon Makaba, so that's pretty cool. And then the only common card in the entire deck, which I apologize for. I tried to make this deck entirely holographic. I can only find common Super Poly. This card is ridiculous. Like, this is one of the only decks that can play this card right now. This was all over the place at the YCS. Basically, in this deck, you can just do some of the most unfair things that you could possibly do. It's crazy. You just summon Alistar and like you Super Poly to take out your opponent's extra deck monster. You get a discard. You get to use Invocation later on in the turn if you want to, if you can summon a Link monster. It's just so good in this deck in particular. So one of the main selling points of this deck is Super Poly. Anyway, for the extra deck, we have 2 copies of Spirit. I should mention that one of the issues with this deck, in terms of like Super Poly at least, is that the extra deck space is super tight. You really don't have room for every single attribute of all the invoked extra deck monsters. If you were going to play this deck at an event, I would highly suggest side decking the different attribute invoked monsters so that Super Poly gets more value in other matchups. Anyway, 2 Spirit Dragon. We have the Azure Eyes, really good card, which just got added to Duel Links actually. Michael and the Black Rose Moonlight. There's no Omega, there's no Crystal Wing. The reason being is that there's no Ancient Fairy Dragon, so it's really hard to make those cards. That's pretty disappointing. However, in this version of the deck versus a regular Blue Eyes deck, it doesn't matter as much because you have Makaba. But yeah, we have 3 sync or synchros. Then we have number 38, which the newly reprinted version is super rare, so we can actually see the artwork. And then I don't think this engine is particularly good in this deck, but it still is something to make if you want to. You can do number 107 into Full Armor Photon into the number 95. I mean, this engine's good. It's good for breaking boards. You get the pop here, you get the double attack here. I don't think it's like extremely valuable. I think if you didn't play this engine, I wouldn't call you crazy, but it certainly is just like something good to make. If the problem is like if you don't play this engine, there's not really like another good rank 8 to play. There's like that new one, the new Galaxy one that like negates monster effects, but I don't know. I don't think the card's like that good. I think in this deck you usually can negate monster effects just in general, so I think the value of Hope Harbinger is just a lot more. Yeah, those are like our rank 8s. For the fusion monsters, we have 2 copies of Invoked Makaba, 1 copy of Invoked Purgatrio. We are not playing Ash Blossom, but every single opponent you ever play against for the next foreseeable future will be playing Ash Blossom, and they always want to Ash Blossom your stuff, so you can usually summon this card. Pretty straightforward. And then 1 Elysium. This is more for the Super Poly than anything, but certainly you can sometimes make it, I guess. But more importantly, it's just there for the Super Poly. And then you might notice that we've already gone through 13 extra deck monsters and we haven't shown any links. Yeah, there's not a lot of space for link monsters. Luckily, this Alistar link is almost good enough to carry all the link monsters on its back. It's just, this card is so helpful for this deck. I can't even explain. I know I've sort of like gushed about this card already. Just the fact that this card is super easy to make and has double downward pointing arrows is just so good for this deck. Like, I remember when we first started playing this deck with links out, and it was so hard to make plays. Like, yeah, you can make like Link Kribo, yeah, you can do like some things like make Decode Talker, but they were all just so bad. This card's so much better. I'm so glad this card exists. It makes this deck so much better. And then the only other Link monster which does not have any downward pointing arrows, so it's not really used for that portion of Link summoning, is Nightmare Phoenix. It's a good card to discard cards. It's a good card to blow up back row. It's just a good card in general, and you can even like summon this and then summon like, because the cool thing about this deck is that all the Blue Eyes monsters are either Spellcaster Light or they are Light Dragon. So if you have Alistar, which is a Spellcaster Dark monster, any of the Blue Eyes monsters except for Sage, you can just link into the Alistar link. And if you have Sage, you could do Phoenix and then summon Sage. Sage is a warrior monster, I believe, or maybe Sage is okay, one second. Let's see. Sage is a spellcaster. Okay, so Sage is a spellcaster, so you can do Phoenix and Sage and then make the Alistar link, which is cool. This doesn't actually take Alistar. A lot of people didn't realize that. This card does not require you to have Alistar. It's just 2 monsters with different types and different attributes. Anyway, though, that's going to wrap up today's deck profile. Hopefully you guys didn't get bothered too much that I'm sick. I will try to post a video tomorrow. No promises, though. We'll have to see. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for waiting so long for this deck profile to finally come out. I really like this deck, and I think that this Alistar link makes a huge difference if you're someone that's trying to play Blue Eyes Invoked. I will see you guys later, though. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.